The moment the platinum card hit the marble floor and was ground beneath the sharp point of a designer stiletto, I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply glanced at the diamond-faced watch on my wrist and noted the time. It was exactly 8:17 p.m. The young woman standing in front of me, laughing as she twisted her heel deeper into the metal, had no idea she had just detonated a bomb beneath her mother's corporate empire. My name is Eleanor Ashford. I am 56 years old, and after nearly 3 decades navigating the razor-edged world of institutional investing, I have learned one universal truth. The people who scream the loudest about their power are almost always standing on the thinnest ice. We were seated at Table 1, the crown jewel of the Whitmore Industries Centennial Gala. The grand ballroom of the Sterling Hotel shimmered with chandeliers cut from Austrian crystal, and the air carried the layered scents of white peonies, aged bourbon, and quiet, calculated ambition. My chief of staff, Catherine Beaumont, sat to my right, discreetly scrolling through the final draft of a $2.4 billion acquisition agreement on her encrypted tablet. The deal was scheduled to close at 9 o'clock the following morning, and it represented the only remaining pathway that could save Whitmore Industries from the debt tsunami that was about to crash across their balance sheet. Then she arrived. Camille Whitmore, 24 years old, with the polished veneer of someone who had never once been told the word no. She carried the meaningless title of Senior Director of Brand Strategy, a position her mother had manufactured for her the day she graduated from a private university in Switzerland. She wasn't alone. Draped on her arm was a young man in a shimmering emerald jacket, his hair slicked back with the confidence of someone who had spent the afternoon rehearsing his smile in a mirror. Camille didn't consult the seating chart. She didn't wait for the attendant to guide her. She walked directly to our table, tapped one manicured nail against the polished wood, and stared down at me as if she were inspecting an unwelcome smudge on her Italian shoes. "You're at the wrong table, sweetheart," she said, her voice syrupy with condescension. "This section is for people who actually matter tonight." I set down my glass of sparkling water and looked up at her calmly. "I believe you may be mistaken. This is Table 1, and I am precisely where I need to be." She laughed, a sharp, bright sound that cut through the surrounding conversations like breaking glass. Heads at the neighboring tables began to turn. "Oh, honey, no. This table is reserved for Ashford Capital's representative, some big-shot investor my mother has been chasing for weeks, and clearly that isn't you. So take your little friend and go find something in the back." Before Catherine could respond, Camille reached down and plucked the custom platinum name card from its stand. She held it up to the light, examined it with a mocking smirk, and then let it drop. It hit the marble with a soft, metallic clatter, and then, with theatrical precision, she stepped on it. She twisted her stiletto back and forth, digging the point into the engraved surface until my name was nothing more than a scratched, ugly smear of tarnished silver. Around us, phones began to rise into the air. Cameras rolled, and I finally allowed myself a slow, small smile. Camille's boyfriend chuckled behind her, the sound thin and nervous, as if he were only just beginning to understand that the room's attention had shifted in a way he hadn't anticipated. He pulled out a chair for her, gesturing grandly as though he had just conquered a foreign kingdom on her behalf. Camille sank into the seat with the exaggerated grace of someone performing for an invisible audience, crossing her legs and reaching for the water glass I had been drinking from. She lifted it, examined it, and then set it aside with a delicate grimace, as if my presence had somehow contaminated the crystal itself. Catherine's knuckles went white around the edge of her tablet. I could feel the anger radiating off her, tightly controlled but incandescent. She leaned toward me and whispered, "Eleanor, we should leave. This is beneath you." I placed a gentle hand on her wrist. "No, Catherine, not yet. Let her keep going. She isn't finished writing her own ending." I bent down slowly, my joints protesting only slightly, and retrieved the mangled platinum card from the floor. I placed it back on the table in front of me, positioning it so the scratches caught the light. Then I looked directly at Camille, my expression calm, my voice even softer than before. "You should not have done that, young lady. I don't believe you understand what you just cost your mother." Camille rolled her eyes so dramatically that her boyfriend actually laughed out loud. "Oh, please, save the theatrics for someone who cares. My mother owns this hotel. She owns half the buildings on this block. She owns the security company that's about to escort your wrinkled little face out the service door. So why don't you make this easy on everyone and just leave?" I did not respond immediately. Instead, I turned my head slightly toward the phones that were now openly recording, and I made certain that when I spoke, every syllable was captured with crystal clarity. "What you just did," I said, "just cost your mother exactly $2.4 billion, and her company, and her name." For the briefest possible moment, Camille's confident smile faltered. It was the kind of hairline crack that only appears when someone's certainty collides with something they cannot immediately categorize. But arrogance is a stubborn creature, and hers recovered within the space of a heartbeat. She threw her head back and laughed even louder than before, gesturing to her boyfriend and to the surrounding tables as if inviting them to share in the joke. 2.4 billion. Did you hear that, baby? This grandma thinks she's carrying around billions in her handbag. She pulled her phone from her clutch and began tapping the screen aggressively. "You know what? Let's settle this right now. I'm calling my mother down. Let's see if she recognizes the great mystery investor sitting at her VIP table." Catherine glanced at me, silently asking whether we should intervene, whether we should simply stand up and walk away before the situation spiraled further. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Some lessons must be delivered in front of witnesses, or they carry no weight at all. And every phone in that ballroom was recording. Every socialite, every journalist embedded among the guests, every rival executive who had spent years watching Vivienne Whitmore climb over other people's ambitions on her way to the top. The classical quartet in the corner continued playing softly, but the conversation in the ballroom had died completely. The room was holding its breath, waiting to see how this particular story would end. Camille pressed the phone to her ear, her eyes locked on mine with pure, glittering contempt. "Mother, get down to the ballroom immediately," Camille said into her phone, her voice sharp with theatrical impatience. "There's some middle-aged woman sitting at our VIP table refusing to move. She's making a scene and claiming she has billions of dollars. It's honestly embarrassing. Yes, table 1. Come now." She ended the call with a decisive tap and set the phone on the table, screen up, as if it were a trophy. Her boyfriend leaned back in his chair and reached for the wine list, his confidence fully restored now that reinforcements had been summoned. Camille smiled at me, a slow, predatory expression that suggested she was already imagining the humiliating conclusion to my evening. "You have about 90 seconds to gather your things and leave with your dignity intact," she said sweetly. "My mother is not a patient woman, and she does not appreciate having her galas disrupted by delusional gate crashers." I did not move. I did not speak. I simply reached for my water glass, took a slow, measured sip, and then set it down again in exactly the same spot. Catherine, taking her cue from me, resumed scrolling through the acquisition documents on her tablet as though the entire confrontation was nothing more than background noise. 90 seconds passed, then 2 minutes, and then the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted before Vivienne Whitmore had even crossed the threshold. Conversations went quiet in ripples, spreading outward from the entrance like water displaced by a stone. Guests turned in their seats. Servers stepped aside. Vivienne walked in with the deliberate, unhurried stride of a woman who had spent decades perfecting the art of making rooms wait for her. She was 53 years old, tall, sculpted by expensive personal trainers and even more expensive surgeons. Her gown was a deep sapphire blue that caught the chandelier light with every step, and her diamonds were arranged around her throat with the geometric precision of someone who understood exactly how much wealth she needed to display in order to intimidate a room. Her eyes were already searching, already narrowed, already prepared for battle. She reached our table in less than a minute. She did not greet Camille. She did not look at the boyfriend. She looked directly at me, and her face registered nothing but cold, dismissive irritation. "I am told you are refusing to vacate a reserved section," Vivienne said, her voice pitched precisely to carry to the surrounding tables. "This is a private event and you are clearly at the wrong function. Security is standing by. I suggest you make this simple for yourself." I studied her face carefully. I looked for any flicker of recognition, any pause of hesitation, any hint that she had bothered to review the dossier her chief investment officer had almost certainly prepared for her. There was nothing. To Vivienne Whitmore, I was simply an older woman in a modest charcoal suit, unadorned by conspicuous jewelry, unaccompanied by a visible entourage. I did not fit the mental template she had constructed for wealth, and therefore, in her calculation, I could not possibly possess it. "Vivienne," I said quietly, "I would strongly encourage you to look at the name on the card in front of me before you continue." She did not look. She lifted her chin slightly and gestured to the two security guards who had positioned themselves discreetly near the entrance. They moved forward on cue, their footsteps muted against the thick carpet, their expressions carefully neutral. Catherine stood up, sliding her tablet into her leather portfolio with a controlled snap that echoed like a gunshot in the silent room. "Ma'am, this is your final courtesy," Vivienne said, her voice dropping into the register she reserved for terminating executives and dismissing servants. "You will either walk out with dignity, or you will be removed. The choice is yours, but the outcome is the same." Catherine stepped forward, positioning herself between me and the approaching guards. Her voice was steady, professional, and edged with the kind of precision that comes from years of watching her principal navigate rooms exactly like this one. "Mrs. Whitmore, I would strongly advise you to reconsider. My name is Catherine Beaumont. I am the Chief of Staff for Ashford Capital, and the woman you are attempting to remove from this table is Eleanor Ashford. She is the founder, chairman, and controlling partner of the firm that your chief investment officer has spent the last 6 weeks begging to meet." For the first time all evening, something shifted in Vivienne's face. It was subtle, the smallest tightening around the eyes, but I have spent my entire career reading exactly that kind of microexpression across boardroom tables. It was the look of a woman whose brain had just registered a piece of information that her ego was refusing to process. She glanced down at the ruined platinum name card on the table. Her eyes moved across the scratched engraving, tracing the letters that spelled out my name in elegant, unmistakable script. And then, because pride is a heavier anchor than reason, she doubled down. "I don't care what firm you claim to represent," Vivienne said, her voice recovering its steel. "Ashford Capital's principal was expected to arrive by private car, escorted by our chief investment officer. She was not expected to walk in unannounced and plant herself at the wrong table like some kind of freeloader. If you are who you say you are, then this is the most unprofessional entrance I have ever witnessed, and it disqualifies you as a partner regardless. Security, escort them out. Now." The two guards hesitated. One of them, an older man with a weathered face and the calm bearing of someone who had spent a career reading rooms, glanced at me and then at the phone still recording from every angle. He understood, even if his employer did not, that whatever happened in the next 30 seconds would be broadcast, dissected, and replayed across every financial channel and social platform in the country by morning. I stood up slowly. I smoothed the front of my suit jacket. I picked up the ruined platinum card one final time and held it up for the cameras to see. Then I looked directly at Vivienne Whitmore, and I spoke gently, the way one speaks to a child who has just knocked over a priceless vase and does not yet understand what they have broken. "Vivienne, you will not remember this night the way you think you will. You will not remember it as the evening you protected your daughter. You will not remember it as the evening you enforced your standards. You will remember it as the exact moment you lost Whitmore Industries. And you will remember it for the rest of your life." She scoffed. She actually scoffed loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Get her out of here, now." I turned. Catherine gathered her portfolio. We walked calmly toward the entrance, past the silent tables, past the raised phones, past the maitre d' who could not meet my eyes. Behind us, Camille was already laughing again, already telling her boyfriend that some people simply could not accept when they were beneath a room's standards. As we stepped into the marble lobby, I pulled out my phone. "Marcus, this is Alina. Kill the wire. Whitmore Industries is dead. I want the funds reallocated to the reserve position by close of business tomorrow, and I want every document, every draft, every preliminary agreement pulled from their council's servers by 10 a.m. Marcus Reeves, my lead banker for the past 16 years, did not ask a single question. He simply said, "Consider it done, Alina. The wire is already frozen. I'll have the withdrawal notice on their CFO's desk before he finishes his morning coffee." I ended the call. Catherine helped me into the back of the waiting sedan, and as the driver pulled away from the curb, I finally allowed myself a long, slow exhale. The Sterling Hotel receded in the rearview mirror, its chandeliers still burning brightly through the tall windows, its guests still oblivious to the fact that they had just witnessed the beginning of an obituary. 3 blocks away, trapped in a motionless line of gala traffic, Robert Hendricks was staring at his phone in absolute horror. Robert was the chief investment officer of Whitmore Industries, the man who had personally spent 6 weeks courting me, flying to Chicago 3 separate times, sending handwritten notes, arranging private lunches with board members. He had staked his reputation on the Ashford Capital deal, and he had been running 15 minutes late because his driver had misjudged the traffic on Park Avenue. His phone rang. It was Vivienne's personal assistant, a young woman named Priya who handled the executive calendar. "Robert, Vivienne wanted me to let you know that the evening is proceeding beautifully. Has Ms. Ashford arrived at the venue? Vivienne is asking." Robert felt his stomach drop into his shoes. "Priya, what do you mean, has she arrived? She was supposed to be seated at table 1 20 minutes ago. Table 1, Priya, the seat directly beside Vivienne's." There was a long, uncomfortable pause on the other end of the line. "Well, Robert, there was a small incident at table 1. Some older woman was refusing to leave a reserved section, but Mrs. Whitmore handled it. Security escorted her out through the service corridor about 10 minutes ago. Everything is back to normal now." Robert did not speak. He could not speak. His mouth had gone completely dry, and his hands had begun to tremble so violently that he had to grip the phone with both hands to keep from dropping it. In that single, catastrophic moment, he understood exactly what had happened. He understood that Vivienne Whitmore, in her infinite arrogance, had personally ordered the removal of the woman who was about to save her company. He understood that 6 weeks of relentless work, of promises made, of reputations pledged, had just been vaporized by a seating chart and a spoiled daughter. His phone buzzed against his ear with an incoming alert from the corporate banking system. He pulled it away and looked at the notification. The $2.4 billion capital injection from Ashford Capital had been officially withdrawn. Reasons cited: material breach of fiduciary courtesy and irreparable damage to counterparty relationship. "Turn the car around," Robert whispered to his driver, then louder, sharper, almost a shout. "Turn the car around. Now, we are not going to the gala. We are going to Alina Ashford's residence, and we are going right now." The driver executed a violent U-turn across 3 lanes of traffic. Robert loosened his tie and began dialing numbers frantically. He called Vivienne. She did not answer. He called Camille, straight to voicemail. He called the board chairman, an aging patriarch named Harold Ashworth. Harold picked up on the second ring. "Harold, we have a catastrophic situation," Robert said, his voice cracking despite his best efforts to control it. "Vivienne just personally ejected Alina Ashford from the gala. The wire is dead. The deal is dead. Whitmore Industries is about to declare technical insolvency by Friday if we do not intervene tonight." Harold Ashworth was silent for a long, terrible moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and cold and edged with the fury of a man who had watched Vivienne climb over his objections for the past decade. "Robert, I want you to listen to me very carefully. Do not go to Alina's residence tonight. She will not see you. She just walked out of a public humiliation, and the last thing she wants is a Whitmore representative on her doorstep in the next 12 hours. You will go home. You will sleep if you can. And at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, you will meet me at my office and we will begin planning how to survive the next 72 hours. Robert did not sleep. Not that night, not for a single minute. He sat at his kitchen table, watching the video of the confrontation spread across social media like an oil fire on open water. By midnight, it had 200,000 views. By 3 a.m., it had crossed 1 million. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, the footage of Camille Whitmore grinding her stiletto into my platinum name card had been viewed nearly 4 million times, and the accompanying commentary was savage. Financial journalists had already identified me by name. Business publications were running emergency morning briefings. The phrase Whitmore extinction event was trending on 3 separate platforms. At my private estate outside the city, the morning was quiet. I sat on the stone terrace overlooking the eastern gardens, a cup of black coffee in my hands, watching the sunrise paint the frost on the boxwood hedges in shades of pink and gold. Catherine stood beside me, her tablet in hand, her expression as composed as always. "The phone has been ringing since 5:30, she said calmly. "Robert Hendricks has called 11 times. Harold Ashworth has called 4 times. Vivienne Whitmore's personal secretary has called 7 times, and Vivienne herself has now called twice from her private line. The Whitmore family attorney has left 3 voicemails demanding an emergency meeting. And the financial press is requesting comment from every angle." "Let them ring, Catherine," I said, taking a slow sip of coffee. "A woman who cannot govern her own daughter cannot be trusted to govern a corporation. Arrogance is a slow-acting poison, but it is thorough. I'm simply allowing it to complete its work." Catherine allowed herself the smallest smile. "And the audit results?" I set down my coffee cup. "Bring them to me." She handed me the tablet. Over the past 3 weeks, while Vivienne Whitmore had been busy planning her gala and selecting her diamonds, my team had been conducting the most invasive forensic audit ever performed on Whitmore Industries without their knowledge. We had begun the process the moment I had first sensed something was off about the family's leadership structure. Something in Robert Hendricks's careful phrasing about internal governance had suggested a fracture line running beneath the surface of the company, and when I looked for the fracture, I found it, and it was far larger than I had anticipated. I scrolled through the summary document slowly, absorbing each finding, each date, each signature comparison. Catherine watched my face carefully. "How bad is it?" she asked. "It is worse than criminal," I replied. "It is stupid." Before I could elaborate further, the security gate at the edge of the drive chimed softly. A black town car was rolling up the gravel path, and Catherine did not need to check the camera feed to know who it was. Harold Ashworth emerged from the vehicle first, followed by Robert Hendricks, who looked as though he had aged 5 years overnight. Both men climbed the stone steps to the terrace with the heavy, deliberate movements of men walking toward a firing squad. "Elinor," Harold said, extending his hand, "thank you for seeing us." "I have not agreed to see you yet, Harold," I replied evenly. "But since you are here, sit. Catherine will bring coffee, and then you will listen." Both men sat. Catherine disappeared briefly and returned with a silver tray. Robert's hands were shaking so badly that he set his cup down without drinking. Harold, who had known me for over 2 decades, understood that this was not a negotiation. This was a briefing. "Elinor, before you say anything," Harold began, "I want you to know that I am prepared to publicly disavow Vivienne's behavior. The board will convene an emergency session this morning. We will issue a formal apology. We will offer any concession you require. But I am asking you, as a friend of 20 years, to reconsider the withdrawal of the capital injection. Whitmore Industries employs 11,000 people. If we collapse, the human cost will be devastating." I studied his face for a long moment. Harold was not lying. He genuinely cared about the employees, about the vendors, about the retirement funds tied to Whitmore stock. That was why I had chosen to speak with him at all. But my decision had been made the moment Camille's heel had touched that platinum card, and no appeal to sentiment was going to reverse it. "Harold, I am going to show you something. And after you have seen it, you will understand that this conversation was never really about a seating chart or a bruised ego. It was about whether Whitmore Industries deserves to continue existing in its current form. And the answer, unfortunately, is no. I nodded to Catherine, who handed her tablet to Harold. Robert leaned over to look at the screen alongside him. For the next several minutes, neither man spoke. The only sound on the terrace was the soft rustle of oak leaves in the morning breeze and the distant call of a mourning dove from the tree line. "This cannot be real," Robert finally whispered. "It is entirely real," Catherine replied. "Every document has been independently verified by 3 separate forensic accounting firms. The signatures have been analyzed by 2 handwriting experts. The digital audit trail has been reconstructed from the internal Whitmore server logs, which we accessed with the full cooperation of your former head of information security, who was terminated 6 months ago for raising these exact concerns to Vivienne and being ignored." Harold's face had gone completely gray. He set the tablet down on the wrought iron table and stared at me. "Alina, if what I am looking at is accurate, then Camille Whitmore has personally executed $140 million in fraudulent loan agreements against Whitmore Industries assets over the past 9 months, using her mother's forged signature, funneling the proceeds through a shell company registered in Nevada to what appears to be a personal cryptocurrency wallet held jointly with her boyfriend." "Correct on all counts," I said. "This is not a corporate governance issue, Alina. This is a federal criminal indictment waiting to happen, which is precisely why we are having this conversation on my terrace, Harold, and not in a courtroom," I replied. "Because you and I both know that once the Department of Justice takes an interest in this case, the collateral damage will not stop at Camille Whitmore. It will consume Vivienne, it will consume the board, and it will vaporize every dollar of shareholder value that remains. 11,000 employees will not simply lose their jobs, they will lose their pension contributions, their vested equity, their severance rights. Whitmore Industries will not be restructured. It will be dismantled." Harold nodded slowly, understanding the shape of what I was constructing. Robert, however, still looked shell-shocked. He kept glancing at the tablet as though hoping the documents might rearrange themselves into something less catastrophic. "So what are you proposing, Alina?" Harold asked. "I am proposing that Ashford Capital will not be injecting $2.4 billion into Whitmore Industries under any circumstances. That door is permanently closed. However, I am prepared to make a different offer entirely. Ashford Capital will acquire the Whitmore family's 42% voting block for 12 cents on the dollar based on last night's closing price. The proceeds of that purchase will be applied directly to the settlement of the forged loan obligations, which my legal team will negotiate with the affected lenders under the umbrella of a comprehensive fraud remediation agreement. This will prevent the loans from being formally declared in default, which will in turn prevent the cross-default cascade that would trigger the collapse of the remaining commercial debt." I paused to allow both men to absorb the mechanics of what I was describing. "In exchange, Vivienne Whitmore will submit her unconditional resignation from all executive and board positions before the close of business today. Camille Whitmore will submit her unconditional resignation before noon. The Whitmore family will surrender any and all claims to their remaining equity positions, corporate housing, executive vehicles, and personal expense accounts. And Camille will voluntarily surrender the proceeds from her fraudulent transactions, in full, to a court-supervised restitution fund. In return, my legal team will refrain from filing the criminal referral with the United States Attorney's Office, and the matter will be resolved through civil settlement." Harold exhaled slowly. "And if Vivienne refuses, then by 2 p.m. today, my legal team will file the criminal referral. By 4 p.m., the story will be released to the financial press with the full evidentiary package. By close of business tomorrow, Camille Whitmore will be in federal custody. Vivienne Whitmore will be facing personal indictment for aiding and abetting a securities fraud she was legally obligated to detect, and Whitmore Industries will be trading at less than $1 per share. The 11,000 employees you are so worried about, Harold, will be filing unemployment claims by the end of next week. Robert finally spoke. His voice was hoarse. Eleanor, this is a very narrow window. It is a generous window, Robert. 12 hours ago, I was ejected from a public event like a piece of garbage. I could have simply walked away, allowed the fraud to be discovered organically over the next several months, and watched the company implode from a comfortable distance. Instead, I am offering Vivienne Whitmore a path to keep her daughter out of federal prison. That is not a narrow window. That is a mercy she has done absolutely nothing to earn. Harold stood up. I will deliver your terms to Vivienne personally within the hour. Harold and Robert departed within minutes, their town car retreating down the gravel drive with considerably more urgency than it had arrived. Catherine watched them go from the terrace steps, her expression thoughtful. She will fight it, Catherine said quietly. Vivienne, she will not accept 12 cents on the dollar. Her pride will not permit it. Her pride is the only thing she has left, Catherine, and she will discover before the day ends that pride is not a currency that settles federal indictments. I was correct. At 11:47 that morning, Harold Ashworth called me directly from the executive floor of Whitmore Industries. His voice was tight with a controlled fury I had rarely heard from him in 2 decades of professional acquaintance. Eleanor, she refused. Vivienne is claiming that the audit is fabricated, that the signature analysis is inconclusive, that the digital trail was manufactured by disgruntled former employees working in coordination with Ashford Capital. She is threatening to file a countersuit for defamation and tortious interference. She is claiming that the entire situation is an elaborate corporate raid and that the board would be committing fiduciary malpractice by accepting your terms. I was not surprised. In fact, I had expected exactly this response, which was why I had prepared the second envelope. Harold, is Vivienne with you now? She is in her office. Camille is with her. Their personal attorney has just arrived. Then walk into her office, put me on speakerphone, and let me have 3 minutes of her time. That is all I require. Harold agreed. 2 minutes later, I heard the ambient acoustics of the executive suite through the phone. Vivienne's voice, sharp and defensive, cut through immediately. Eleanor, whatever fabricated evidence you believe you have assembled, I want you to understand that my legal team will. Vivienne, stop talking. You are about to make an already catastrophic morning considerably worse. I'm going to speak and you are going to listen. Catherine has just uploaded a second document to a secure portal that Harold now has access to. Please open it, Harold. There was a pause. I heard Harold's fingers on his tablet. Then I heard a very sharp intake of breath. What is that? Vivienne demanded. What is he looking at? Vivienne, that document is a series of encrypted messages between your daughter Camille and her boyfriend, Julian Vance, exchanged over the past 4 months. My cybersecurity team recovered them from a cloud backup that Camille failed to properly secure. In those messages, Camille explicitly describes forging your signature. She explicitly describes the shell company structure. She explicitly describes her intention to, and I am quoting directly, drain the old woman dry before she notices anything. The old woman, Vivienne, is you. Your daughter has been systematically stealing from your company and from your personal accounts for the better part of a year, and she has been laughing about it in writing to her boyfriend. The silence on the other end of the phone was absolute. I could hear the faint hum of the office ventilation system. Nothing else. You have 2 options, Vivienne. Option 1, you accept my terms as previously stated, and your daughter avoids federal prosecution. Option 2, you continue to defend her, and by this time tomorrow, Camille will be in a holding cell. You will be facing personal civil suits from every institutional shareholder in your company, and Whitmore Industries will cease to exist. You have 30 minutes to decide. I ended the call. 23 minutes later, Harold Ashworth called back. His voice was quiet, drained of everything except exhaustion. She signed, Eleanor. Both of them signed. The resignations, the equity transfer, the restitution agreement. Camille wept through most of it. Vivienne did not shed a single tear. She simply signed each page as though she were disposing of a body. Thank you, Harold. Have the documents delivered to my counsel within the hour. And Harold, one more thing. I want you to serve as interim chairman until Ashford Capital completes its evaluation of the executive team. There will be significant restructuring, but the 11,000 employees will be protected. You have my word on that. Thank you, Alina. I mean that sincerely. I ended the call and set the phone on the wrought iron table. Catherine poured me another cup of coffee. The sun had climbed higher over the eastern gardens, and the frost on the boxwood had melted into a light dew that caught the light like scattered glass. The story broke publicly at 3 p.m. that afternoon. Not the fraud story, which would remain sealed under the terms of the settlement, but the leadership story. The financial press announced that Vivienne Whitmore had resigned effective immediately, citing personal reasons, and that Ashford Capital had acquired a controlling interest in Whitmore Industries in a rescue transaction that had been executed over the course of a single trading day. The stock, which had opened at $47 per share, closed at $19. Ashford Capital had acquired the family's entire voting block at an average price of $5.64 per share. Within 18 months, under new leadership and restructured governance, the stock would recover to $62 per share, and Ashford Capital would exit the position with a return that quietly became one of the most studied case files in 3 separate business school curricula. Camille Whitmore surrendered her fraudulent proceeds in full. Her boyfriend, Julian Vance, disappeared from her life within 72 hours of the settlement. She was quietly enrolled in an out-of-state private university under her mother's maiden name, and she has not resurfaced in any public capacity since. Vivienne Whitmore sold her Manhattan penthouse, her Hamptons estate, and her collection of contemporary art at auction over the following 8 months. She now lives in a modest apartment in a small coastal town in Portugal, where she is occasionally photographed by tourists who recognize her from the viral video. She has never given a public statement about that evening. She has never issued an apology. She has never, to my knowledge, spoken my name aloud again. I kept the platinum name card. Catherine had it professionally cleaned and mounted in a small shadow box, which now sits on the corner of my desk at the Ashford Capital offices in Chicago. The scratches are still visible. The stiletto marks are still visible. Visitors sometimes ask about it, and I usually smile and tell them it is a reminder. A reminder that the loudest people in the room are almost always standing on the thinnest ice. A reminder that arrogance is a slow-acting poison, but it is thorough. A reminder that the woman in the modest charcoal suit, sitting quietly at the table with a glass of sparkling water, is very often the person you should have taken the time to actually see. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories like this one. Leave a comment below and tell me, what would you have done in Alina's position? I read every response. Peace.